We have all been waiting for this as the Toronto Maple Leafs season is less than 24 hours away and the roster has been finalized. The lines seem to be finalized. We're going to break that down, discuss what it means going forward, as well as a recent article that dropped that gave some very surprising information, we'll say. So stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we get into it, quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. If you're a part of the 70% who aren't subscribed to the channel, you're going to want to hit the subscribe button. Again, the Leafs season starts tomorrow, and we're going to have you up to date with all the latest Leafs news like we did in the offseason. So if you enjoy the daily Leafs content, hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 14,000 subscribers. But Darius, we have a lot to go over today, and now we're getting super close. We are less than 24 hours away from opening night against the Montreal Canadiens and what's going to be probably a very chippy game, an entertaining game nonetheless, but the offseason is almost over now, and we have some things to discuss today, and it seems like the lines are finalized. Obviously, yesterday, we kind of got the final moves that happened. We know that Timothy Liljegren is still a Toronto Maple Leaf at this time, but we're starting to get some insight now, according to the coach and according to some things like that, regarding what the lineups will be, and we have a lot to discuss. So let's just dive right into it. Here were the lines at the Leafs' final practice before the season opener, and now we finally have it in stone, basically. So it's Matthew Nyes, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, Domi, Tavares, Nylander, Pacioretty, Holmberg, Robertson, Lawrence, Kampf, and Reeves, or Lorentz. We have whatever one he wants to pronounce it as. It's still up in the air there. But there is basically, at this point, it's a very interesting lineup, and I have some thoughts on it, but this is what it's going to look like. We'll know for sure in tomorrow morning's skate before the game, but it seems at this point, all signs are pointing to Holmberg manning the third-line center and Tavares still being the second-line center. Not my favorite, but it's something that's definitely interesting.
Yeah, a lot of interesting things in this lineup. And one thing I want to say right away is I think for the, foreseeable future until we get an answer, it's Steven Lorentz for me and Steven Lawrence for Nick. And we'll just make everyone happy that way. I think that's the way we'll do it. But because I've heard both. And when he was in the OHL, it was Lawrence. But anyway, interesting for sure is when you go through the first couple lines, obviously the Nylander at center experiment seems like it's done. And it seems like it might be done for good because obviously it's a new coach. He came in, said he wanted to try it. Berube's always been a fan of trying it. And obviously, through training camp and preseason, it just hasn't worked. So he's back on the wing. Tavares up in the second line position, second line center position. And that's a pretty good second line. I'm excited to see what they're able to do there because obviously Berube likes to work in pairs. And obviously Tavares is joining those two on the second line. The first line, I'm expecting big things from already. I think Marner's going to have a fantastic year. But as you work your way down, I mean, Pacioretty, Holmberg, and Robertson, there is some offense there, but it's also a pretty heavy line. When you look at Pacioretty, he checks pretty well. He's hungry on pucks, and Holmberg is fantastic. He's so underrated. He's been one of my favorites for a long time already. So same for him. He's a great third line center. He'll be great in that position. And it's a heavy fourth line that can create offense as well. Like Reeves, I think, is underrated. We saw the other night in creating offense from his strength. And Lorentz is going to be really good at that too. And we know what we have in David Kampf as well. Will he stay? Will he go? We don't know for sure. It's going to happen in a month now. The Leafs have bought themselves time with a lot of these roster moves that they made last night. But when you look at the lines, and obviously we know what we have in the defensive pairings, I'm sure things are going to change as we go along as well, and they're not going to stick together. But this looks like a much better team than last year for sure. And I'm really liking the depth because, as you noticed, Bobby McMann isn't even in the opening night lineup, or it seems that way. We'll have to wait for morning skate tomorrow morning, but he's not even there yet. So a lot will change as we go along over the course of the next month, but I'm liking what I'm seeing so far, at least heading into game one.
Yeah, and again, they have till November 1st until, to keep this lineup, and I think it's going to be it's going to be in and out because, again, they play the New Jersey Devils in game 2 of the season on the second night of a back-to-back. So they're going to probably, depending on what happens here, you could see a world where McMahon doesn't play tomorrow, but then he plays on Thursday. And yeah, you mentioned it. The one thing here that I've seen a lot of Leafs fans not fired up about, but a bit interested in, and I've seen some reporters and beat writers saying the same thing, there is the confidence in Pontus Holmberg manning the third line center. Now, you obviously are a big fan of Pontus Holmberg. I like him as well. I think he's very good. I think he would be very good on the fourth line as a fourth line center. I think a third line center, it's still yet to be seen. I want to see more of it, and that's exactly what we're going to see probably tomorrow. But that's the only, that third line is a little interesting to me. You mentioned it, Pacioretty, Holmberg, Robertson. I like Robertson there, and again, by having Nylander not playing center, everybody, now we were talking about the whole offseason about how putting Nylander at center moves everybody down. by not having him at center, it kind of moves everybody back to what they were last year, but really moved everybody up in not in a bad way necessarily, but you have Tavares in the second line, you have Holmberg and Kampf manning your third and fourth line center. So I'm curious to see, and that's going to be one of the biggest things for me tomorrow, is seeing how Pontus Holmberg mans that third line center and see how he does, because it's going to be interesting to see how he does, especially on the faceoffs. But looking at the defense now, basically what we expected: Riley, Tanev, OEL, McCabe, Benoit, except Timmins is in there instead of Liljegren, which we expected at this point because that's what all signs basically pointed to. Again, you're not a huge fan of the OEL McCabe. Clearly something there is working. I also like the continuity that they have now because Timmins is going to be in and out, swapping with Liljegren, swapping with Hakanpää. So obviously OEL is one of their big signings. So having him alongside Jake McCabe, who is also most likely going to sign a contract here soon, having them man that second line on the blue line there for the next 3 to 4 years gives some continuity to OEL, who could definitely use it, especially because he's more of an, not necessarily a fully offensive-minded defenseman, but he can score the puck as well.
Yeah, the defense, at least the pairings as they are right now, is really exciting to me because they're going with the opposites attract theme, right? When you look at Riley and Tanev, perfect. I think Riley's going to have a fantastic year because Tanev is going to be able to stay back, and Riley's going to finally have a defensive partner that's equal to him and, can take care of the puck defensively and move it. I think Tanev is an underrated puck mover as well. And when you look at OEL and McCabe, again, you have that dynamic, right? OEL might be a little bit more defensive. McCabe brings the physicality and the defensive side of the puck. And then Benoit, a little bit slow, can't really move the puck, but then he has Timmins, a guy who can move the puck beside him. So I'm liking that. And obviously they don't have the third right shot defenseman, but guys are going to alternate, like you said. Liljegren has to earn his spot back, and if he doesn't, I think within the next month he will be gone because Hakanpää is going to come back. A couple of guys are going to come back, and they're going to have to move somebody again by, I believe it's November 1st. Their game on November 1st would be 10 games. So they have about a month here or he has about a month to earn his spot back. But until then, they'll probably be alternating. I'm sure we'll see Liljegren probably game 2 of the season, as early as that. So, but when you look at the defensive pairings, again, more depth, way better than last year in my eyes. And I love the fact that, everyone seems to match up with each other so far. Again, I'm interested to see how that OEL and McCabe thing works out because it didn't look great in the preseason to me. But right now, I think that's the way they should at least start it. And then you make tweaks as you go. And it's exciting to me for sure, the defensive pairings.
Yeah, looking at the power play here now, let's just dive into it. Ahead of the season opener, power play 1, you have Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, and Riley. And then power play 2 has Robertson, Pacioretty, Domi, Nyes, and Ekman Larson. So OEL is manning the power play 2 spot. You could see a world where him and Riley switch depending on what happens in the season. I mean, there's a lot of different switches that can and swaps, even with the starting lineup, that could happen after tomorrow's season opener. But something else here that dropped from The Athletic, and they released their 2025 season projections. And based on 50,000 simulations, the Maple Leafs are expected to finish with 106 points, 94% chance of making the playoffs, the second highest odds behind Edmonton, and they have a 57% chance to reach the division finals, 32% chance to advance to the conference finals, and an 18% chance of making the Stanley Cup final, with about a 9% probability of winning the cup. Now, I'm going to be the first one to say, obviously, these are based off of advanced analytics and simulations, things like that. The Leafs need to get out of the first round. They've only done that once in the past half decade here. So I'm not going to put too much stock into any of these projections because every year you can make an argument that they had a 50% chance to make it the second round. That being said, I think the sentiment among Leafs fans right now is that things are looking pretty good regarding their lineup. It's the most confident I've been in a Toronto Maple Leafs regular season and potential playoff lineup in a very long time here. And it reflects in the simulations that they did based on their advanced analytics here.
Yeah, it definitely does. And again, like you said, these are based off advanced analytics and their simulations. It doesn't account for the mental aspect of the game either, right? Which the Leafs have to get past the first round. So this is nice to look at. And I am expecting them to finish somewhere like 106 points and make the playoffs. That does make sense. They might take a little bit of a step back even in the regular season, but as long as, they're better in the playoffs, that'll be fun. If you can bring up the power play lines again, I just want to touch on that before the season starts. I think it's really cool if you look at the way Berube and co have them lined up here. Obviously, same kind of power play unit that we saw last year as the power play 1 unit there. I feel like OEL might actually take that spot away from Riley at some point, but the second power play unit is way better in my eyes than last year. You have Pacioretty who can stand in front of the net, or even Nyes who can stand in front of the net. And then you have 2 shooting threats in Pacioretty and Robertson. And I want to see Robertson on the power play. We haven't seen him last year, so I'm thrilled that he's there this year. Domi, obviously the playmaker, and OEL is very underrated on the power play. We saw last year what he did for the Florida Panthers. So the power play, especially if they split it up instead of playing one unit for a minute and a half and then the other unit for the last 30 seconds, is going to be a lot better this year. And I'm excited to watch that. So it all starts tomorrow.
Yeah, buckle up. And It's going to be very exciting to see what happens with this. Let us know in the comments. Do you have any gripes with the projected lineup in their final lines for the opener? Are you excited for Leafs hockey to get back underway? Because tomorrow morning, or afternoon, morning, we'll have a video covering the final lineups, but I have a very sneaking suspicion that this is going to be very similar to what we're going to see tomorrow against the Montreal Canadiens. But so make sure to hit the subscribe button. We'll have you up to date with all the latest Leafs news, including the game tomorrow. We'll see you then.